Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with the agreement reached between Governor Tate Reeves, House Speaker Philip Gunn, and Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. At issue is a bill that strips spending power from the governor over $1.25 billion in federal money. The bill easily passed both chambers last week with a veto-proof majority, but the governor wasn't backing down, saying that the directives were for state governors to determine where the money goes. The stalemate came to an end when all three leaders met at the governor's mansion and appeared together at Thursday's news conference.
I've committed to work with the legislative leadership. I am committed to that as long as we can find resolutions that meet all of our objectives. That's critically important. I believe that we can. I believe in my heart that we can. I believe that everyone that sat at this table today are well-intentioned and want to do right. Now, we just have to execute.
Well, the agreement was to basically operate as normal. And we're not deviating from the norm. And in the norm, the legislature appropriates the money and the governor administers the money. And that's what we're going to do.
We're all here to work on solutions for Mississippians. And while we may not agree on one thing or another, the Mississippi Senate and the Mississippi House are going to appropriate the funds necessary to allocate these dollars to Mississippians as quick as humanly possible. That is my goal, and I think it's a goal for all the senators that we represent.
Under the agreement, the bill remains on hold in the Senate. Under the terms, the legislature will appropriate the Coronavirus CARES Act funds, and the governor will advise. The House Speaker insists that all sides will have a seat at the table, from the Legislative Black Caucus to the governor. At this point, there are no firm details as to where the money will go. COVID-19 disrupted school for students across the country, and Jackson Public Schools was no exception. Teachers had to change the way they taught as students had to go online to learn. And now with the current school year wrapping up, attention is now turning to next year and whether and how students can go back. Joining us now is Dr. Errick Greene, the superintendent of Jackson Public Schools. And Dr. Greene, it's been about 2 months now since this all happened, and students have spent about that time distant learning. How has that evolved in Jackson Public Schools?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a mixed bag. By and large, our scholars are definitely engaging in learning. We've had lots of wonderful creativity and work from our educators very quickly, turning on a dime in order to move the learning into the online space. So by and large, things are going better than really one would expect, given the short notice that all of us have had with this. From my estimation and what I'm seeing and hearing from team members, there's a good number of youngsters who are engaging online, whether it's in online classrooms, Google Classrooms, Zoom lessons and that sort of thing, or utilizing some of the online tools, the various websites, educational learning websites that we might use to support their learning. So that's great, but more of them are relying on the packages, I believe. We had a lot of requests for packages, many more than we thought we would have, just based on the numbers of folks who were engaging online. And so we're pleased that we were able to do both, and we actually had some wonderful partnerships to help us to print those pretty thick, robust learning packages. And so, you know, it's tough. It's been tough on everyone, I would say, and for a variety of reasons. But I'm pleased with the way in which our resilient teachers, our resilient scholars and families have just hung in there with us as we really start to live into what seems to be our new normal.
You're already encouraging folks to register online, so are you kind of getting prepared for that?
We're planning still for the summer and what may or may not happen in the summer in terms of, I think most school districts and educators are assuming that any summer learning would be virtual and not in person. And so we're still planning and putting finishing touches on that. that, but also thinking through next year. And of course, there's still lots of questions about what we'll be allowed to do in terms of any limitations on gatherings and that sort of thing. We're assuming that there will continue to be some virtual learning that will occur. And so obviously our team is working with various partners and vendors to ensure that of our scholars have the devices to utilize and connectivity, which is another big issue for many families. Lots of questions that still, are out there, of course, and hopefully folks will understand that this is not something that you just immediately draft a plan and go with that plan. Information is still rolling out. We're still getting more and more guidance from health officials, from the U.S. Department of Education, from the Mississippi Department of Education, still thinking through where there are flexibilities and opportunities for us to do things differently and still meet scholars' needs, but also being realistic about the challenges, especially as we think about any shifts in the length of day or scholars coming perhaps some days and not other days, that will have huge impacts on families and around childcare and all of that. So while we don't have the answer for that, those are some of the things that are being tossed around in the education leadership spaces. And so our teams are obviously thinking through some of the logistics and the costs and the implications of those different pathways.
Are you able to assess if students are falling behind because of this distant learning? The governor has encouraged supplemental learning programs for the summer or fall to help those students in this. Is this something that you're already working on, and how would you manage that?
Sure. So some people know and others probably don't know. We typically, our pacing of our curriculum and the skills and concepts that are taught in each grade level, much of that is done in quarters in the first, second, and third terms of the school year. And that's aligned with the state test. That also gives us time in the fourth term to really solidify some of the learning, to extend it and accelerate a bit there. So that's how we typically operate in the normal kind of run of things. There are some skills and some concepts that were not taught through the third term, and so we're obviously thinking about and planning for how do we catch young people up with that, even as we launch into the next grade levels learning and the skills and the standards that they're going to be held accountable for. So there's some bit of skill building and learning that was not introduced to young people. And we typically experience over the summer, it's just kind of the way it works. Quite often, there's some learning loss that happens. So we would imagine that all of that to say that there's some learning loss and there's some kind of regression or falling behind that young people have experienced. A bit of that is typical, though. And so I want to stress that we typically see a bit of that over the course of the summer. With this extended closure, we're just planning for that. I do want to say, though, and this was echoed by Dr. Wright with the Mississippi Department of Education, the expectation, though, is that we hit the ground running in the fall. However the structure looks, whether it's virtual, in-person, blended, hit the ground running with the standards, the skills, the concepts for that next grade level, and then weave into that any of the backfilling of skills that may be shaky now based on the closure, or some skills that perhaps were not covered and taught during the closure of this fourth term.
What about final grades? I know some colleges have offered a pass-fail with the option of getting a letter grade. What are you guys going to do about final grades?
Yeah, that's a great question. Much like other districts in the area, we've got and again, appreciate the Mississippi Department of Education and their push for equity. Wanted to make sure that no young people, regardless of your family dynamics and the support systems at your home, or regardless of your access to devices or its connectivity. We wanted to make sure that none of our scholars would be penalized for not having those supports in the home. And so what we know for sure is everyone can access or can get access to our learning packets. And so we utilize those as the floor level for learning, and then understanding that some young people will have access to online devices and that. Based on that, we wanted to ensure that in the very least, the grades that young people earned in terms 1, 2, and 3, that those were used and averaged, and then used the average for term 4. And that basically would be their final grade. And so we wanted to not have those packets, whether they complete them or not, have that penalize them and draw down their grade levels. So they will start with wherever they were at the end of 3rd term in terms of their average grade, and completion of and submission of those packets and that the learning assignments that they had during the closure, that would be used as additional credit for them. So it can only support and increase their grading.
How have seniors reacted, and talk about the plans for seniors in graduation? Our seniors they're hurting, and so are their families, and so are their educators. We're all hurting, given the implications for our graduates. And so we took our time and looked around and listened and got some ideas from other districts, and also, wanted to see what we might be allowed to do in terms of some of the guidance from health officials and from the state and local officials. So while we're not able to do the traditional ceremony as we had all hoped, and I've been talking about it since the summer and early in the year, looking forward to shaking their hands and greeting them and hugging them as they walk across the stage. We're not able to do that. Our team has developed what I believe is a really, really thoughtful and meaningful experience for them. We'll have our scholars. There's a whole process for them with scheduled times to come to the Memorial Stadium downtown. In small groups, they will walk across the stage in their cap and gown. We'll record that on video. We'll take pictures of them. We'll take pictures of them in front of chairs that are set up with pictures of their photos of their classmates. As if they were all there together, but obviously they won't be. We'll take those videos of each of the youngsters, the graduates walking across the stage, and create a compiled video for the actual graduation ceremony. And that ceremony would include each of them walking across the stage. It would include the speeches from the different, the salutatorian, valedictorian, the principal, board member, from me, compile all that together. That graduation ceremony would be played at the date and time that's already been established for their formal graduation, and that would be the formal graduation of the young people. We encourage them to watch, have a watch party at home of their graduation ceremony, for the graduates to actually wear their caps and gowns, because we'll have them to turn the tassel, we'll have them to toss their caps, and they'll be proclaimed graduates of their schools and alumni of Jackson Public Schools. And so while it's not the same, it's absolutely something that a lot of heart went into, and looking forward to celebrating in that way. Has COVID-19 changed the way we will educate students going forward?
I think it's broadly and widely, or becoming widely understood that we won't go back to the way we were. We will be forever changed. And how much of this sticks in terms of how we operate, how we educate young people, the degree to which and the ends to which we educate young people, the tools that we use, the role that they play in their own learning, in terms of being more self-directed and owning a bit of that learning, as well as the roles that family members and the village around our graduates. All of that is being shifted. While there are some great opportunities to use technology, there are also some real challenges around, we've all grown up, all of us adults, and young people, wherever they are in their schooling, whether they're in the third grade and they've had only a few years, or the rising seniors for next year. They've all had experiences in schools. And so we're having to relearn what it means to learn as an individual and to learn in a collaborative effort. We prize collaborative work. And so projects and having conversations with folks at in your immediate space in your classroom. Those are things that we use as educators to deepen learning and to support young people in understanding a concept and to kind of have dialogue with one another. All those things are shifting, inclusive of how we grade, how any products of student work are submitted to teachers and that sort of thing. The great thing is there are lots of educators who have been doing this kind of thing over the years. They've been, on the cutting edge of using Google Classrooms and some of the other platforms to create learning experiences. Others of us, older educators, are having to catch up and to do it very quickly and to continue to innovate, because again, will be forever changed. All the issues around social emotional learning and socializing, just a lot of those things that we kind of take for granted, being in the space together, are things that we'll have to reset and do differently, because they're still important. It's still important to have counseling for kids who need counseling. It's still important for all of the extracurricular, the arts and the athletics, all of that. It's still important. The clubs that we have, all of that's still really important to young people in their development. Just got to do it differently.
A time of difficulty, a time of change, and a time of opportunity. Our thanks to Dr. Errick Greene for joining us. We'll be right back with much more of Mississippi Insight. Some local restaurants are back open tonight after the governor reopened more of the economy earlier this week. There are strict rules to follow. 12 News' Alex Love shows us how businesses are operating.
For the first time in 2 months, if you wanted to go out to eat in Mississippi with dining services, dinner is served.
In Ridgeland at Tico Steakhouse, the grills were fired back up and customers were ready to chow down.
I know that New York strip and the potatoes au gratin are going to be better than ever, and I know that they've been anxious to feed us, and I cannot wait.
They have assured us that the wait staff and everybody would be overly protective, which I feel like they are.
To stay on top of social distancing guidelines, owner Tico Hosemann spaced out his tables and required every staff member to wear masks and take temperatures at the door.
We did a really deep cleaning, sanitized everything. The linen company came and took all the old linen off so we could get fresh linens.
At 50% capacity, Tico can fit up to 90 customers at once in his building as he works to get his place back on their feet. Meanwhile, at the Pearl Pizza Inn, it's a sea of empty tables.
Not many people wanting to come in and work right now with the COVID. It leaves just the few people that are here, and we can't prepare for such a, I guess, hefty crowd.
Since shutting down, Pizza Inn went from 20 full-time staff members to just half a dozen working one whole day. They called Reeves' 4-day time frame impossible to meet.
Our trucks have not been able to arrive on time, so that puts us behind even more with our inventory. I'm hoping that everything will slowly fall back into place.
Under Executive Order 1478, signed on Monday, any restaurant reopening to dine-in services must make employees wear PPE equipment based on their duties with customers and safe food handling. But next to a blazing oven, wearing a mask can be difficult.
You're standing by an oven that produces about 500 degrees, and that's on each side, and it's not comfortable trying to breathe and having heat on you at the same time.
Under the current executive order, only certain parts of Mississippi are allowed to open up to 50% capacity for dine-in services. If county supervisors or mayors see their communities as hotspots, they can take their guidelines further. Reporting in Ridgeland, Alex Love, 12 News.
And we'll be right back. A reminder, coming up all next week, Rebuilding Mississippi. A look at what it will take to get the state's economy up and running. The impact of COVID-19 and other recent disasters on Mississippi, from businesses to education and much more. What we've learned and what the future might look like. That's Mississippi Insight for tonight. Our thanks to Dr. Errick Greene. Until next week, make it a good night.